Hello everybody. How are you doing? I hope you're doing well. What's going on here is that it's cold. Not. Sorry. Just turn down my headphones. There you go. And get them out of the way. Wondering what was talking to me, as usual. Anyone would think that I knew that I would have figured out what I was doing by now. Not very good at that. Just making sure now that the sound is turned off on my phone. Yes, it is. It is basically muted, something like that. I've just been looking for illustrations for the next book that I'm going to read for you. Otherwise I have to actually take photos or scan them myself, which it looks like that's going to be what's going to happen because I can't find the illustrations. Anyway, but we'll get there. And I'm typing that in. And then I'll talk to you. Sorry about that. Right, so we have the last chapter today of the story of the Amulet. I'm guessing we're going to find both halves of it, and I'm guessing that the Samir is going to use it to be able to go and hide away forever somewhere where there is nice, comfortable sand, and the children's parents will come home. And will it be because the Amulet brought their parents home, or will it just be because their adventures using the Amulet with the Samir have actually let enough time pass so that their parents were ready to come home anyway? Aha! We don't know. We shall find out as we read, won't we? But I will give you a little bit of information about what we're going to do next. Sorry, I'm just unlocking my book. If you're new here, this is what I usually read from. It's an iPad mini. It's a first generation iPad mini. It's that old. It's not as old as me, but it is an old iPad. And all it does is I can go online to Project Gutenberg, which I shall give you the link for, by the way. Oh, I need to find my cursor in the right box. No, I don't need to type that much. So I've given you the link for Project Gutenberg. If you're watching the recording of this or if you're watching it live, then you will see that. If you're on YouTube, then look up Project Gutenberg, and it's Gutenberg. And it is the source for a lot of us for public domain books for reading. It has non-fiction books. It has books that have been written as general books, like books that are suitable for adult readers, and it also has children's books there, but they're all books that are in the public domain. And because most of my books are still in cardboard boxes in storage, even though I've lived in this house for a number of years, I don't yet have my office space set up. At the moment, the space behind me is storage for other things in the house, not my books. I don't have bookshelves up with books on them. So that's why you get to have a picture of the street that the children in our current story were living in 6 years before this photograph was taken. So Project Gutenberg is where I get my books from. I have been looking for a digital copy of another book by the same author that I am going to be reading next, because there's a particular book that I would like to be able to read to you, but it hasn't been digitized. Thankfully, I have a physical copy of the one that I will be reading next. I'm just hoping that some stage between now and the next time I want to read one of her books, the other book gets digitized so that I can read it for you too, because I don't know where it is. I don't even know if I have it or somebody else in the family has it, or a friend of the family who is probably finding the book very dear to them and has never thought to actually return it to us. I don't know. I don't know if I'll ever know the answer to that question. Anyway, so what's up? We've got the last chapter of the story of the Amulet, and if you're watching on Twitch, that's the cover of it, that up in the top right hand corner of the screen. If you're watching on YouTube, Maybe I'll get around to doing a thumbnail for the videos, which will basically show you the same image as part of the thumbnail. What it looks like is a red hardcover book that has gold imprint on it saying the story of the amulet, and then it's got the name of the author and the illustrator, and then in gold imprint you've got a picture of an Egyptian mummy, an open door, and the 4 children of the story. And that's what it looks like, but it's one of those old books. So the book we're going to be reading next is, sorry, I'm just being attacked by something falling off the desk. Not seriously attacked, actually, just this, my thank you card from Vodafone, of course, Vodafone, saying thank you in Māori, ngā mihi or ngā mihi, and then the constellation of Matariki, which is not how I remember seeing it, but that's okay. It's probably one of the versions of it, depending on how many stars you can see. And this is my keep cup from them as a thank you for being one of their business customers. Right, so the book that I'm going to be reading, which I do actually have in my hand, is this one here. It is called The Dream Girl's Garden, and it's by a lady called Edith Howes. Now, this is next time I read, not today, but I'm just sort of like baiting you, getting you ready for the next one that I read. So this is the one, and as you can see, it's pretty beat up. It's falling apart, and someone at some stage has tried to save it by putting what they call invisible tape on it. And the problem with, which is, generally speaking, invisible tape is okay for books because it doesn't cause acid decay problems, but it also has a little bit of old sellotape on it, which I will not try to remove because it will wreck the illustration on the cover. But the problem with invisible tape is that it gets brittle over time, and so that's what it's done. Someone has lovingly taped along this edge here and wrapped it around, but it is split, and the bit that was on the cloth here has fallen off. And obviously this bit here is not really doing well. You can see it's a fairly old book because the pages aren't perfectly trimmed together so that they all line up, and also because of the state of the stitching through the spine and the glue that they would have used at the time, the sections have not stayed together the way they ought to. Right, sorry, I'm just trying to get this where I'm meant to be looking at something else. Right, so this is the new book that I will be reading next time, and today is Monday, so I should be reading it on Wednesday. I will not be reading on Friday because I have to take someone to a medical appointment down at the nearest hospital just for a checkup on something and get a small procedure done. Just one of those things. When you're dealing with elderly relatives, you become the transport and the logical thinking and all that sort of stuff. So that's going to be what I'll be doing on Friday instead of reading to you. I will be thinking of you, trust me on this. So I was going to show you something about this book. So it's got a very faded illustration on the front cover. It's a fairy that's sitting on top of a toadstool or a mushroom, obviously. And unfortunately, the title page and half title page are missing, so we are straight into the first page of the actual story. We don't have a bit missing there. Somebody has glued a piece of muslin tape or bandage, unelasticated bandage tape in there, and I can see that they've used that as a way to wrap the main part of the book to hold the pages so they're still together. That sort of fabric is actually what they used to use for bookbinding, so I'm thinking it may have come off the original front yeah, see, look, this is the state of it. It's falling apart quite seriously. I'm trying to get it so you get a little bit of light coming into it and you can see it's falling apart. Yeah, so this is the sort of book that I actually grew up reading. This particular book is one I have read. It's got my grandmother's name in the front. It does have a few illustrations, not a lot, not as many as this current book that we're reading. I shall see if I can find you a an illustration because if I can, the ones that are actually inside the book are usually a little bit clearer than the faded ones on the cover. Here we go. Here's one of the illustrations inside. See, the colours are a little bit brighter. They would never have been particularly bright, and people wouldn't have noticed it as being a problem because they wouldn't have expected them to be particularly bright just because of the standard of printing that was available at the time. This one was published in the 1920s. No sooner had they eaten than they all fell fast asleep. That's the caption on it. And they're all sitting in a rose bush, obviously. So, looking forward to that. That one carries a lot of memories. It's written by the lady who wrote... can't remember. There was one that we read a while back, which I wasn't majorly impressed with because I hadn't actually read that one myself when I was younger. But it was one which was a collection of little stories explaining things, scientific things, in fantasy terminology, and this is written by the same lady, but this one is more of an actual story rather than a whole lot of little bits. So there you go, that's what that is. So yes, I have already figured out what we're reading after we finish this book. I'm not sure exactly how many pages we've got to go because my with the Gutenberg books, they have, at the end of the last chapter, they have all the publishing and editing information they have from being able to produce it as a digital book so that you can see a little bit of the background on the work that's been done to make it available as an ebook. And one aspect of that is that they actually just tack that on to the end of the last chapter, so you don't know how many pages are actually in your last chapter. Now, I've just had a little bit of a start there. I've realised the battery on this is a little bit low, so I better plug it in because it's not as good as it used to be. It does work reasonably well, but not as good as it could be. Right, so how about we get on with reading? No, I better introduce myself. If there's anyone new here, or if there's anyone new comes along and watches the video afterwards. Yep, or watches over on YouTube, because people do still do that. I have people that I have been making friends with through other people on YouTube who happen to also listen to the stories and give me a greeting every now and then, just to let me know that yes, they're still around and yes, they're still watching the stories. I was saying earlier on that the weather hasn't been great, so that's why we've got the thermals on again. It's not my favourite time of the year, but we do have a fire going. I do have my coffee. So we'll get on with the actual intro for those who are new here. Hi, I'm Jev. I read old children's books. And I read them because I loved them when I was growing up. I still love them as an adult. I enjoy reading them myself. And a lot of them are no longer available easily for people who are used to being able to just pick up a book from the library because they're too old. First of all, most libraries will only hold a book on the shelves if it's within 3 years old, maybe 5 years, or if it's exceptionally popular. So you will probably find books written by Jane Austen, plays by William Shakespeare, those sort of people who are, another one, Charles Dickens. You will probably find books written by those people in your local library. But that will be because they are particularly popular and very well known and have become part of our cultural background. The books that I tend to read are ones that don't have quite that same experience behind them. They don't have a history of lots and hundreds and thousands and millions of people reading them and raving about them, and they haven't become cultural markers or anything like that. They're just kids' books, and so those are the ones I read. Those are the books I read. I love them. I want other people to experience them. I want other people to discover that they're actually available. And I mean, if you decide that you want to follow up on reading more books by one of the authors that I read, fantastic, go for it. Start, if you need to find copies of them, start with Project Gutenberg, which I've given you a link for. Otherwise, yeah, do ask around. Do look at the local library, because your one might be one of the exceptions, but also look at second-hand bookshops, because you'll often find that either second-hand bookshops or second-hand shops, such as charity shops, goodwill shops, op shops, depending on what country you live in as to what they're called. We call them op shops, opportunity shops. The shop gives you an opportunity to discover all sorts of treasures. So if you look in their book section there and look for something that has an older cover, yeah, you can get reprints in paperback if those are available. I have some other children's books that I love dearly, which I have most of them in the early version hardbacks. No, I don't have them with the dust covers because they never last very well. But there are, to complete the full set, which they are a set that were very, very key to me when I was growing up. I actually have some paperback versions. They were secondhand when I got them as paperback versions, just to complete the set, because I haven't yet been able to find ones in the hardback format that I would like, even just in hardback format and prices that I can afford. I will eventually find them, possibly, and add to the collection that I already have, but unfortunately they are ones that I can't read for you because they're not yet in public domain. I would love to, but I'm not prepared to take that risk, because for a starter, I happen to know that the copyright on those ones is very, very fiercely protected, because there is a very large fan base, and effectively the current copyright holders can actually still make a reasonable living off the works and what they represent, because of the fact that they are guarding the copyright. I'm not prepared to take that away from them and then have to deal with legal ramifications of if they find out blah blah blah, because legally, I mean, I don't have the right to be able to do a public broadcast with those books without their permission, and they are not likely to give it to me unless I pay a hefty fee, which I'm not at this stage. But one day they will come into public domain, and if I'm still reading children's books online, I will do so. So there you go. So yeah, I'm Jev. I live in New Zealand, commonly referred to as NZ. I read old-fashioned children's books because they're there. They're fun. I don't want people to lose them. And I think that's about it for those. I read 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 3 p.m. New Zealand time. I have the quietest Discord server in the world, almost, probably, something like that. Occasionally people will join, but we don't really get into. People will say hi and maybe say what their favourite book is from when they were growing up. But that's usually about it. And you're most welcome to join our Discord if you want. Oops. Type in the right box again. So you are welcome to join our Discord server. Get into conversation. Get conversation going. Start talking about things. Start asking questions. All that sort of stuff. I do from time to time try to get some illustrations from the current book that we're reading, or ones that we've already read, because I forgot to at the time. Loaded onto the Discord server in the channel that's appropriate for that book. But it's also a great place to make suggestions about books that you would love to see read if they are possible, because they are public domain books. Let me know. All that sort of stuff. I do have 3 tips if you're new here. Everyone else who's been here before knows these 3 tips. First tip, make sure you have something to drink. Handy. I've always got water, because it's great for the brain. It keeps the brain working. And yes, that was my water bottle hitting my drink cup, my glass one, but didn't break anything. I've also got coffee in my keep cup with my lovely Matariki Stella cluster on it. Point 1, drink. Point 2, snacks. Point 3, comfortable. If you're enjoying a good book, it usually helps, or if you want to enjoy a good book, it usually helps to be somewhere where you're comfortable. Somewhere comfortable to sit, stand, lie, whatever. Don't get too cold if you're in a cold climate. Lots of rugs, heaters, snuggly cats or dogs, whatever. that sort of thing. Make yourself comfortable. If it's really hot where you are, make sure you buy an open window if you can, or air conditioning, a fan, have some ice in your drink to help cool you down, all that sort of stuff, because I would love it if you can just be totally relaxed and enjoying the book. I think I've talked enough. I think it's time to read. Let's finish off this book. The Story of the Amulet by Edith Nesbit. We are reading Chapter 14, The Heart's Desire. If I only had time, I could tell you lots of things. For instance, how, in spite of the advice of the Psammead, the 4 children did, one very wet day, go through their amulet arch into the golden desert, and there find the great temple of Baalbek, and meet with the phoenix whom they had never thought to see again. I wonder why the Psammead had advised against it. And how the phoenix did not remember them at all until it went into a sort of prophetic trance, if that can be called remembering. But alas, I haven't time. So I must leave all that out, though it was a wonderfully thrilling adventure. I'm guessing the phoenix hadn't yet met them in its own timeline. That's why it needed to go into prophetic trance. Anyway, carrying on. But alas, I haven't time, so I must leave all that out, though it was a wonderfully thrilling adventure. I must leave out, too, all about the visit of the children to the hippodrome with the Psammead in its travelling bag, and about how the wishes of the people round about them were granted so suddenly and surprisingly that at last the Psammead had to be taken hurriedly home by Anthea, who consequently missed half of the performance. Then there was the time when Nurse, having gone to tea with a friend out Ivalunk way, I have no idea where Ivalunk is, Ivalunk, you can see if that's a real place or not. Having gone out to tea with a friend out Ivalunk way, they were playing Devil in the Dark. Another thing I'm not aware of. I'm guessing it's a game of some sort, but like hide and seek or sardines maybe, Devil in the Dark, and in the midst of that most creepy pastime, the postman's knock frightened Jane nearly out of her life. She took in the letters, however, and put them in the back of the hat-stand drawer so that they would be safe. And safe they were, for she never thought of them again for weeks and weeks. Oh dear, I'm betting that there's something important in those letters. One really good thing happened when they took the Psammead to a magic lantern show and lecture at the boys' school at Camden Town. Now, a magic lantern show is what we would call a slideshow these days. And people these days don't actually do slideshows anymore, but when I was growing up they did. We still actually have slides in this house, and a slide projector and a projector screen. So it is something that can be done, but it's not something that's commonly done. Right. Took the Psammead to a magic lantern show and lecture at the boys' school at Camden Town. The lecture was all about our soldiers in South Africa, and the lecturer ended up by saying, "And I hope every boy in this room has in his heart the seeds of courage and heroism and self-sacrifice, and I wish that every one of you may grow up to be noble and brave and unselfish, worthy citizens of this great empire for whom our soldiers have freely given their lives." Oh dear, he said the important word, wish. And of course this came true, which was a distinct score for Camden Town. As Anthea said, it was unlucky that the lecturer said boys, because now she and Jane would have to be noble and unselfish, if at all, without any outside help. But Jane said, "I dare say we are already because of our beautiful natures. It's only boys that have to be made brave by magic," which nearly led to a first-class row. And I dare say you would like to know all about the affair of the fishing rod and the fish hooks and the cook next door, which was amusing from some points of view, though not perhaps the cook's. But there really is no time even for that. Once again, it's to do with the fact that people use the phrase "I wish" very flippantly. And the first book was all about that. The wishes that the children made, and then when they realised that there were consequences to the things they wished and they would need to actually be a little bit more careful, and then without realising it, using the phrase "I wish" just casually in conversation before they had actually got to the point of making the wish that they had planned. So they missed out on that one. And having to deal with the consequences of their casual wish. We don't realise how often we do it, do we? Anyway, the only thing that there's time to tell is the adventure of Masculine and Cooks and the unexpected apparition, which is also the beginning of the end. Ooh. It was Nurse who broke into the gloomy music of the autumn rain on the window panes by suggesting a visit to the Egyptian Hall, England's home of mystery, though they had good but private reasons to know that their own particular personal mystery was of a very different brand. The four all brightened at the idea. All children, as well as a good many grown-ups, love conjuring. "It's in Piccadilly," said old Nurse, carefully counting out the proper number of shillings into Cyril's hand, "so not very far down on the left from the circus. There's big pillars outside, something like Carter's Seed Place in Holborn, as used to be Day and Martin's Blacking when I was a girl, and something like Euston Station, only not so big." "Yes, I know," said everybody. So this is the Egyptian Hall, was a place that she's trying to give them similarities to other buildings, but they've all seen it before. So they started. But though they walked along the left-hand side of Piccadilly, they saw no pillared building that was at all like Carter's Seed Warehouse, or Euston Station, or England's home of mystery as they remembered it. Maybe we should look this place up, find out if it was real. The Egyptian Hall, London. And the reason why I'm looking it up is because often places that are mentioned in the story actually were real places. And I find it very, very intriguing to see what they were like. The Egyptian Hall in Piccadilly, London, was an exhibition hall built in the ancient Egyptian style in 1812 to the designs of Peter Frederick Robinson. The hall was a considerable success with exhibitions of artwork and of Napoleonic-era relics. The hall was later used for popular entertainments and developed in association with magic and spiritualism, becoming known as England's home of mystery. In 1905, the building was demolished to make way for flats and offices. Oh, there you go. Now, hang on a minute. This story was published in 1906. Maybe that's why they can't find it, because it's been pulled down. I'm going to save a copy of the... No, not that one. There's another one. Save a copy of a picture of it, so that you can see what it looked like. No, that's not what I clicked on. Save image, and then you can see. Oh, goodness me. It was a real place indeed. Now I need to find the right folder to put it in so I can pull it up. That one and that one, subfolders. Right. I've also found a picture of something that looks a little bit like that, but it looks like a modern photograph. So I'm thinking someone has rebuilt. Because that is definitely a modern photograph. I think it's another building that's been built in that style. Right, here we go. finding the picture. Actually, I'll just put it as the background. No, I won't. I shall find it in here and show it to you. Here we go. See, it says museum at the top, and it's got columns with lotus blossom heads. That's what those are. And then you've got, they look like caryatids actually, where you've got like a statue of a person acting as a column to hold something up, and then they're carrying the weight on the heads. And then with these angles like this for the sides of the building. And then along the top that's curved and it comes outwards. It goes outwards like that. The wall of the building comes up like that, and then it's got a curve that comes like this at the very top, and that's all painted along there, that edge. That's probably lotus flowers and lotus buds and things like that for the image along the top. Right, and for some reason it's not seeing me and refocusing. Now it is. Okay. I'll find the next picture that we are meant to have in the story so that we are ready for it at the right time. And I shall carry on reading. I wish I could actually do reading and picturing at the same time, but I can't. I'm sorry. Right, there we go. Though they walked along the left-hand side of Piccadilly, they saw no pillared building that was at all like Carter's Seed Warehouse, or Euston Station, or England's Home of Mystery as they remembered it. At last they stopped a hurried lady and asked her the way to Maskelyne and Cook's, which is obviously meant to be in the building, I would guess. I don't know, I'm sure, she said, pushing past them. I always shop at the stores, which just shows, as Jane said, how ignorant grown-up people are. It was a policeman who at last explained to them that England's mysteries are now, appropriately enough, enacted at St. George's Hall, so they tramped to Langham Place and missed the first two items in the programme. I would guess that's because the building itself had been taken down to build these apartments, which the article I was just reading to you had actually mentioned. I'm just looking to see if there was anything else in here. No, just in 1905 the building was demolished and flats and offices built on the site at 170 to 173 Piccadilly. Odd. I shall find the article that was in. I would like to. There. I'd found it before, but then lost it again. Oh well, that's okay. Right. So they tramped to Langham Place and missed the first two items in the programme, but they were in time for the most wonderful magic appearances and disappearances, which they could hardly believe, even with all their knowledge of a larger magic, was not really magic after all, which they could hardly believe was not really magic after all. That's what they're saying, even though they actually knew about the fact that there are some things that were outside of normal, i.e. what you can do with the amulet, or if the Samoyed's granting wishes. If only the Babylonians could have seen this conjuring, whispered Cyril. It takes the shine out of their old conjurer, doesn't it? Hush, said Anthea, and several other members of the audience. Now there was a vacant seat next to Robert, and it was when all eyes were fixed on the stage where Mr. Devant was pouring out glasses of all sorts of different things to drink out of one kettle with one spout, and the audience were delightedly tasting them, that Robert felt someone in that vacant seat. He did not feel someone sit down in it. It was just that one moment there was no one sitting there, and the next moment, suddenly, there was someone. Robert turned. The someone who had suddenly filled that empty place was Mara, the priest of Amun. He's found them. What's he intending to do? Though the eyes of the audience were fixed on Mr. David Devant, Mr. David Devant's eyes were fixed on the audience. And it happened that his eyes were more particularly fixed on that empty chair, so that he saw quite plainly the sudden appearance from nowhere of the Egyptian priest. A jolly good trick, he said to himself, and that worked under my own eyes in my own hall. I'll find out how that's done. He had never seen a trick that he could not do himself if he tried. By this time, a good many eyes in the audience had turned on the clean-shaven, curiously dressed figure of the Egyptian priest, probably because they were noticing where Mr. David Devant was looking. "Ladies and gentlemen," said Mr. Devant, rising to the occasion, "this is a trick I have never before performed. The empty seat, third row from the end, second row, gallery, you will now find occupied by an ancient Egyptian, warranted genuine." He little knew how true his words were. He thought it was just someone dressed up and he was just using fancy show language. And now all eyes were turned on the priest and the children, and the whole audience, after a moment's breathless surprise, shouted applause. Only the lady on the other side of Mara drew back a little. She knew no one had passed her, and as she said later over tea and cold tongue for sandwiches, it was that sudden it made her flesh creep. That's what she said. Mara seemed very much annoyed at the notice he was exciting. "Come out of this crowd," he whispered to Robert. "I must talk with you apart." "Oh no," Jane whispered. "I did so want to see the mascot moth and the ventriloquist." "How did you get here?" was Robert's return whisper. "How did you get to Egypt and to Tyre?" retorted Mara. "Come, let us leave this crowd." "There's no help for it, I suppose," Robert shrugged angrily, but they all got up. "Confederates," said a man in the row behind. "Now they go round to the back and take part in the next scene." "I wish we did," said Robert. "Confederate yourself," said Cyril, and so they got away, the audience applauding to the last. In the vestibule of St. George's Hall, they disguised Mara as well as they could. Let's find out about this St. George's Hall. Yes, it was another real place. There you go. St. George's Hall was a theatre located in Langham Place off Regent Street in the West End of London. It was built in 1867 and closed in 1966. So perfect time frame for being the place to host these shows. The hall could accommodate between 800 and 900 people, or up to 1,500 people including the galleries. The architect was John Taylor of Whitehall. The hall was known for 3 decades for its presentation of German reed entertainments, whatever those are. Accordion music? Because accordions have metal reeds in them. Alongside other musical works and lectures. After 1895, so that was the earlier part, I suppose, it was used for vaudeville, drama, magic shows, as the headquarters of the London Academy of Music, and even as a skating rink. So vaudeville is a theatrical genre of variety entertainment born in France at the end of the 19th century. A vaudeville was originally a comedy without psychological or moral intentions, based on a comical situation, a dramatic composition of light poetry, interspersed with songs and then there's a whole lot of other language. In 1933, it became a BBC broadcasting studio, but was shut down after extensive damage from bombing in March 1943. The theatre was demolished in 1966, and the St George's Hotel and Henry Wood House now stand on the site. There you go. It was a real place. And I'm seeing if there's anything showing the outside of it that would be impressive enough to be worth showing you. Nope, nothing. No outside picture that goes, wow, that's different, for you to be needing to see it. Really? You can look it up if you want, but it's not existent anymore anyway. In the vestibule of St George's Hall, they disguised Rekmara as well as they could, but even with Robert's hat and Cyril's Inverness cape, that was kind of like something that you wore over your clothes to make sure you don't get too wet when it's misty and drizzly and all those sorts of things. Even with all of those, he was too striking a figure for foot exercise in the London streets, for walking there and back. It had to be a cab, and it took the least money of all of them. They stopped the cab a few doors from home, wise move, and then the girls went in and engaged old Nurse's attention by an account of the conjuring and a fervent entreaty for dripping toast with their tea, leaving the front door open so that while Nurse was talking to them, the boys could creep quietly in with Rekmara and smuggle him unseen up the stairs and into their bedroom. When the girls came up, they found the Egyptian priest sitting on the side of Cyril's bed, his hands on his knees, looking like a statue of a king. "Come on," said Cyril impatiently. "He won't begin till we're all here. And shut the door, can't you?" When the door shut, the Egyptian said, "My interests and yours are one." We'll see. I'm not going to necessarily agree with that thought until we see what he's really intending, because intention really shows. I'm just finding the layout of these pictures so I can see where we're going next to make sure I don't miss the next one. Oh yeah, okay, right. I've got it ready for you. It's just I don't want to look at it there because otherwise it's going to spoil the story for you. "My interests and yours are one." "Very interesting," said Cyril, "and it'll be a jolly sight more interesting if you keep following us about in a decent country with no more clothes on than that." "Peace," said the priest. "What is this country, and what is this time?" So he's figured out something that the amulet does. "This country is England," said Anthea, "and the time is about 6,000 years later than your time." "The amulet, then," said the priest, deeply thoughtful, "gives the power to move to and fro in time as well as space." "That's about it," said Cyril gruffly. "Look here, it'll be tea time directly. What are we to do with you?" "You have one half of the amulet, I the other," said Rekmara. "All that is now needed is the pin to join them." "Don't you think it," said Robert. "The half you've got is the same half as the one we've got." "But the same thing cannot be in the same place and the same time, and yet be not one but twain," said the priest. "See, here is my half," and he laid it on the Marcella counterpane. Marcella was obviously a particular design style, and no, I don't need to look that one up. You can for yourself. "Where is yours?" Jane, watching the eyes of the others, unfastened the string of the amulet and laid it on the bed, but too far off for the priest to seize it. I think that is a wise move. I'm trying to find the right line. Even if he had been so dishonourable. Cyril and Robert stood beside him, ready to spring on him if one of his hands had moved, but ever so little towards the magic treasure that was theirs. But his hands did not move, only his eyes opened very wide, and so did everyone else's, for the amulet I'm not quite sure what the sentence means. But his hands did not move, only his eyes opened very wide, and so did everyone else's, for the amulet the priest had now quivered and shook. And then, as steel is drawn to the magnet, it was drawn across the counterpane nearer and nearer to the amulet, warm from the neck of Jane. And then, as one drop of water mingles with another on rain-wrinkled window pane, as one bead of quicksilver is drawn into another bead, Rekmara's amulet slipped into the other one, and behold, there was no more but the one amulet. "Black magic!" cried Rekmara, and sprang forward to snatch the amulet that had swallowed his. But Anthea caught it up, and at the same moment the priest was jerked back by a rope thrown over his head. The boys were obviously ready for this. There you go. So Anthea's holding on to the amulet. There he is. He's being pulled back because there's a rope that was dropped over his head. It's obviously got down to around his elbows here by the boys. The priest was jerked back by a rope thrown over his head. It drew, tightened with the pull of his forward leap, and bound his elbows to his sides. Before he had time to use his strength to free himself, Robert had knotted the cord behind him and tied it to the bedpost. Then the 4 children, overcoming the priest's wrigglings and kickings, tied his legs with more rope. "I thought," said Robert, breathing hard and drawing the last knot tight, "he'd have a try for hours, so I got the ropes out of the box room so as to be ready." That's smart. The girls, with rather white faces, applauded his foresight. "Loosen these bonds," cried Rekmara in fury, "before I blast you with the 7 secret curses of Amun-Ra." "We shouldn't be likely to loose them after," Robert retorted. "If you cursed us, we're not likely to untie you afterwards, are we?" That makes sense. "Oh, don't quarrel," said Anthea despairingly. "Look here, he has just as much right to the thing as we have. This," she took up the amulet that had swallowed the other one, "this has got his in it as well as being ours. Let's go shares." Ooh, I wonder what's going to happen next. Ha! We'll find out, won't we? Very soon. Just trying to get to the next picture. Getting it ready for you. Right, yeah. Okay. "Let's go shares," said Anthea. "Let me go," cried the priest, writhing. "Now look here," said Robert. "If you make a row, we can just open that window and call the police. The guards, you know, and tell them you've been trying to rob us. Now, will you shut up and listen to reason?" "I suppose so," said Rekmara sulkily. But reason could not be spoken to him till a whispered council had been held in the far corner by the washstand and the towel horse. A council rather long and very earnest. It says here wash hand stand. It's a stand, like a little tabletop that has a basin on it that you can pour water into for washing your hands, rather than it being indoor plumbing, just because that's what's likely to be used at the time. So here we go. And a towel horse. A towel horse is a rack that you put your towels over so they dry so you are ready to use them again. They are ready for you to use again. Right, I'm just checking something because I am meant to check something. Right, and I am going to do what I'm meant to be doing. So I'm just letting you know what I'm doing. One of the things I've learnt, this is especially important for people who are watching who are also streamers. Keep an eye on your who is in your channel when you're streaming. So if you look at the chat panel, there's a button up near the top that looks like 2 peg heads, basically like two bodies next to each other, one's taller than the other. And the button, I think, says community. No, it says users in chat, sorry. So if you click on that, you will see who is watching you, who's in your channel. Most of the time that's not a problem, but there are known to be a lot of bots around at the moment, and what they are doing, some of them, is they are stealing the personal information of everyone who is in your channel at the time. So people who are commenting in the chat, but also people who are watching, who just show up in the users in chat function. And then the bot will harvest that information. The person who is running the bot will then sell that information on or use it for nefarious purposes themselves. So that's one of the reasons why you should ban them. And another reason is if you have a very active community who like to gift subscriptions to other users when you are streaming, those bots are eligible for receiving those subscriptions just as much as any other user who is in chat. Now, there are some bots that are okay, such as Commander Root, SiriBot, and a few other ones like that. This is aside from your standard proper chat bots that are authorized by Twitch. Now, Commander Root and SiriBot are both ones that are also authorized, but sometimes they will also show up in that chat area. Those are safe. The other ones, if you go to a website called Twitch Insights, twitchinsights.net, and then /bots, and type in or copy paste the name of anyone you're not sure about that's in your users in chat into there. If they show up there, especially if they have, if they show up there and it says, because it says there how many channels that is actually sitting in. I'll just look at this one here. So I've just pasted a name that's in my users in chat, and it's currently showing up in 27,000 live channels, which means it's not a real person who's sitting there watching my channel, is it? Which makes you wonder. So if there's a lot of bots sitting in your channel, start with the ones that are in the biggest number of other channels and ban them. /ban space paste in the name of that bot and then hit enter in your chat, and that will actually mean that they cannot interact in your chat. And then if you have enough time, you also block them, which means that they can't interact with you personally. Just a bit of streaming housekeeping. It's a good idea to do it. It's quite fun actually, just to keep an eye on things and see what's there and what they're doing. So it'll continue, just because of the cache on your browser, it'll continue to show them, even if you've done that, show them there for a little bit longer. And then when you refresh that in your, if you're a streamer, if you're using moderators tools, if you refresh that, you will actually eventually see that they're no longer there. If you moderate for somebody who actually has a very busy channel, or if they happen to be on the front page of Twitch, even if it's your own country's version of Twitch, such as a friend of ours sometimes gets on the Australia New Zealand front page, sometimes they get on the main front page because they're a disability advocate as well, and they're representing different organisations that have asked him to be involved, and he's just gaming. But sometimes the chat will get extremely busy, and so there'll be a collection of people who are moderators for the user at the time who's streaming. And if you are a moderator like that, it's a really, really good idea to keep an eye on that users in chat panel and start banning. Use the Twitch Insights website. If they show up there, especially if they show up there with anything in anything more than 50 other channels, ban straight away. Just go through, just ban them one at a time, and you'll actually, they do not contribute to your view numbers. So there's no point in leaving them there. And others say, oh, but then, if they're not doing anything, they're not causing any damage. Yeah, but they are actually doing things. You don't know which ones of those are stealing your users, your viewers' personal information. And did you know that as a streamer, you are actually held accountable by Twitch legally for the actions of what happens in your channel's chat? So if if you can't prove that you didn't know that it was a bot and something goes wrong associated with one of those bots, you can get a lifetime ban. You don't want that. Anyway, so there you go. That's just one of my other bits of information that I get interested in. And I just had to take my socks and sandals off because it gets so hot. Sorry about that. So yeah, as a streamer, keep an eye on it. I'm prepared to interrupt my reading just to let you know what I'm doing when I do that sort of thing. And yes, I know normally I don't interrupt with things outside of what we're reading about in the middle of a chapter, but I feel that it's actually worth you guys knowing that information. I came across a guy the other day who actually said he gets a lot of pleasure out of banning bots in his chat. It's just, sort of like squishing bugs sort of thing. A great way to look at it. And yeah, you don't gain anything by having them in your numbers of viewers and things like that, because sometimes they show up as viewers, sometimes they don't. But it will not gain you anything towards affiliate by having them there, honestly, because Twitch is aware that they are there. There's a whole lot of things that it would be nice if they were able to be completely banned and stopped. So they couldn't do that sort of thing. But one of the things I get a little bit disappointed about is when people say, oh, but then it's not a problem, I'll just leave them. And then somebody with money that they have earned very kindly donates a handful of subscriptions to other users within the stream because they love being able to enjoy that streamer's work. And so they're sharing it, they're sharing their delight in it by gifting subscriptions to other users, and then bots get those subscriptions, not other people who are going to actually appreciate that streamer's work. I find that really sad that can happen, and that people actually just say, oh, no, the bot's not doing any damage. It's kind of like somebody's stolen off you and stolen off the people who otherwise would have been the recipients. Give you something to think about. Anyway, yeah, no, bots are not good. So ban them whenever you can. That's what I say. Right, but start with ban, and then if you've got time, you can also do block. But ban is usually enough. Right, I'm going to carry on reading with the book. Yeah, I will. And then I'll tell you about Codex later. Because I didn't start with telling you about Codex just because there weren't a lot of people here who didn't already know about Codex, but I'm going to tell you afterwards anyway. Right, we'll carry on. Where are we? They had a whispered council that was held in the far corner by the washstand and the towel horse, a council that was rather long and very earnest. At last Anthea detached herself from the group and went back to the priest. Look here, she said in her kind little voice. We want to be friends. We want to help you. Let's make a treaty. Let's join together to get the amulet. The whole one, I mean. And then it shall belong to you as much as to us, and we shall all get our heart's desire, which is the name of the chapter. Fair words, said the priest, grow no onions. Fair words, grow no onions, was the intent of what he was saying. We say butter, no parsnips, Jane put in. But don't you see we want to be fair? I'm like, butter, no parsnips, what does that mean? Okay, whatever. But don't you see we want to be fair? Only we want to bind you in the chains of honour and upright dealing. Will you deal fairly by us? Said Robert. I will, said the priest. By the sacred secret name that is written under the altar of Amun-Ra, I will deal fairly by you. Will you too take the oath of honourable partnership? No, said Anthea on an instant, and added rather rashly, we don't swear in England. Except in police courts, where the guards are, you know, and you don't want to go there. But when we say we'll do a thing, it's the same as an oath to us. We do it. You trust us and we trust you. She began to unbind his legs, and the boys hastened to untie his arms. When he was free, he stood up, stretched his arms, and laughed. Now, he said, I am stronger than you, and my oath is void. I have sworn by nothing, and my oath is nothing likewise, for there is no secret sacred name under the altar of Amun-Ra. Oh, yes, there is, said a voice from under the bed. Everyone stared, Rekmara most of all. Cyril stopped and pulled out the bath of sand where the Samiad slept. "You don't know everything, though you are a divine father of the temple of Amun," said the Samiad, shaking itself till the sand fell tinkling on the bath edge. "There is a sacred name beneath the altar of Amun-Ra. Shall I call on that name?" "No, no," cried the priest in terror. "No," he said. "No," said Jane too. "Don't let's have any calling names." "Besides," said Rekmara, who had turned very white indeed under his natural brownness, "I was only going to say that though there isn't any name under—" "There is," said the Samiad threateningly. "Well, even if there wasn't, I will be bound by the wordless oath of your strangely upright land, and having said that, I will be your friend. I will be it." "Then that's all right," said the Samiad, "and there's the tea bell. What are you going to do with your distinguished partner? He can't go down to tea like that, you know." "You see, we can't do anything till the 3rd of December, said Anthea. "That's when we are to find the whole charm. What can we do with Rekmara till then?" "Box room," said Cyril briefly, "and smuggle up his meals. It will be rather fun." "Like a fleeing cavalier concealed from exasperated Roundheads," said Robert. "Yes, the Cavaliers and the Roundheads. That was Charles the First and the Parliamentarians, and it was part the English Civil War. Sorry, I'm trying to think of what to call it. There's another book that I really enjoyed reading. It's for older children than this one. Actually, no, not really, but it's more historic based, called The Children of the New Forest. And that one is about the children hiding away in the forest, the New Forest, from the Roundhead soldiers because their father was a royalist. So maybe that's another one we can read sometime in the future too. Right. "Feeling like a cavalier concealed from like a fleeing cavalier concealed from exasperated Roundheads," said Robert. "Yes." So Rekmara was taken up to the box room and made as comfortable as possible in a snug nook between an old nursery fender and the wreck of an old big four-poster bed. They gave him a big rag bag to sit on and an old moth-eaten fur coat off the nail on the door to keep him warm, and when they had had their own tea, they took him some as well. He did not like the tea at all, but he liked the bread and butter and cake that went with it. So, because where he comes from, he's not used to drinking tea, English tea. That's an idea that came from China, but it was done differently by the English. Completely, much, much later than what the Egyptian was used to in the history. And I need a drink of water, sorry. Right. He liked the bread and butter and the cake that went with it. They took it in turns to sit with him during the evening and left him fairly happy and quite settled for the night. But when they went up in the morning with a kipper, I don't know what he's going to think of a kipper. There is smoked dried fish, a flat thing, a quarter of which each of them had gone without at breakfast to make up a full kipper. Rekmara was gone. There was the cosy corner with the rag bag and the moth-eaten fur coat, but the cosy corner was empty. Good riddance was naturally the first delightful thought in each mind. The second was less pleasing because everyone at once remembered that since his amulet had been swallowed up by theirs, which hung once more round the neck of Jane, he could have no possible means of returning to his Egyptian past. Therefore he must be still in England and probably somewhere quite near to them, plotting mischief. Oh dear, the attic was searched to prevent mistakes, but quite vainly. "The best thing we can do," said Cyril, "is to go through the half amulet straight away, get the whole amulet and come back." "I don't know," Anthea hesitated. "Would that be quite fair? Perhaps he isn't really a base deceiver. Perhaps something's happened to him." "Happened," said Cyril. Not it. Besides, what could happen? I don't know, said Anthea. Perhaps burglars came in the night and they accidentally killed him and took away all that was mortal of him, to avoid discovery. Obviously, she's trying not to upset Jane. Or perhaps, said Cyril, they hid the all that was mortal in one of those big trunks in the box room. Shall we go back and look? He added grimly. No, Jane shuddered. Let's go and tell the Psammead and see what it says. No, said Anthea. Let's ask the learned gentleman if anything has happened to wreck Mara. A gentleman's advice would be more useful than a Psammead's. And the learned gentleman will only think it a dream like he always does. They tapped at the door, and on the come-in entered. The learned gentleman was sitting in front of his untasted breakfast. Opposite him, in the easy-chair, sat Wreck Mara. Hush, said the learned gentleman very earnestly. Please hush, or the dream will go. I am learning. Oh, what have I not learned in the last hour? In the grey dawn, said the priest, I left my hiding place, and finding myself among these treasures from my own country, I remained. I feel more at home here, somehow. Of course I know it's a dream, said the learned gentleman feverishly, but oh, ye gods, what a dream! By Jove! Call not upon the gods, said the priest, lest ye raise greater ones than ye can control. Already, he explained to the children, he and I are as brothers, and his welfare is dear to me as my own. He has told me, the learned gentleman began, but Robert interrupted. This was no moment for manners. Have you told him, he asked the priest, all about the amulet? No, said Wreck Mara. Then tell him now. He is very learned. Perhaps he can tell us what to do. Wreck Mara hesitated, then told, and oddly enough none of the children ever could remember afterwards what it was that he did tell. Perhaps he used some magic to prevent their remembering. When he had done, the learned gentleman was silent, leaning his elbow on the table and his head on his hand. Dear Jimmy, said Anthea gently, don't worry about it. We are sure to find it today, somehow. Yes, said Wreck Mara, and perhaps with it, death. It's to bring us our heart's desire, said Robert. Who knows, said the priest, what things undreamed of and infinitely desirable lie beyond the dark gates. Oh, don't, said Jane, whimpering. The learned gentleman raised his head suddenly. Why not, he suggested, go back into the past, at a moment when the amulet is unwatched. Wish to be with it, and that it shall be under your hand. It was the simplest thing in the world, and yet none of them had ever thought of it. Come, said Wreck Mara, leaping up. Come now. May I come? The learned gentleman timidly asked. It's only a dream, you know. Come and welcome, O brother, Wreck Mara was beginning, but Cyril and Robert with one voice cried, No! You weren't with us in Atlantis, Robert added, or you'd know better than to let him come. Dear Jimmy, said Anthea, please don't ask to come. We'll go and be back again before you have time to know we're gone. And he too? We must keep together, said Wreck Mara, since there is but one perfect amulet to which I and these children have equal claims. Jane held up the amulet. Wreck Mara went first, and they all passed through the great arch into which the amulet grew at the name of power. The learned gentleman saw through the arch a darkness lighted by smoky gleams. He rubbed his eyes, and he only rubbed them for 10 seconds. The children and the priest were in a small dark chamber, a square doorway of massive stone. I'm just going to look for this image. Right, okay. A square doorway of massive stone. Looking for the line on the page. Of massive stone, let in gleams of shifting light, and the sound of many voices chanting a slow, strange hymn. They stood listening. Now and then the chant quickened and the light grew brighter as though fuel had been thrown on a fire. Where are we? Whispered Anthea. And when? Whispered Robert. This is some shrine near the beginnings of belief, said the Egyptian, shivering. Take the amulet and come away. It is cold here in the morning of the world. And then Jane felt that her hand was on a slab or table of stone, and under her hand something that felt like the charm that had so long hung around her neck, only it was thicker, twice as thick. It's here, she said. I've got it. And she hardly knew the sound of her own voice. Come away, repeated Rekmara. I wish we could see more of this temple, said Robert, resistingly. Come away, the priest urged. There is death all about, and strong magic. Listen. The chanting voices seemed to have grown louder and fiercer, and light stronger. They are coming, said Rekmara. Quick, quick, the amulet. He's got his hand out to stop the children from moving closer into the space. They are coming. So there's people here. Oh dear, there's Jane. There's Jane, being held on to by Anthea. And there's Cyril and Robert. At least he's looking after them now, the Rekmara. They are coming, cried Rekmara. Quick, quick, the amulet. Jane held it up. What a long time you've been rubbing your eyes, said Anthea. Don't you see we've got back? The learned gentleman merely stared at her. Miss Anthea? Miss Jane? It was Nurse's voice, very much higher and squeaky and more exalted than usual. Oh, bother, said everyone, Cyril adding, You just go on with the dream for a sec, Mr. Jimmy. We'll be back directly. Nurse'll come up if we don't. She wouldn't think Rekmara was a dream. Then they went down. Nurse was in the hall, an orange envelope in one hand and a pink paper in the other. Oh, okay, so she wasn't in the room with them. They could hear her voice coming up the stairs. Miss Anthea! Miss Jane! Her voice was much higher and squeakier and more exalted than usual. Your pa and mum's come home. Pa and ma's come home. Reach London 11:15. Prepare rooms as directed in letter. And signed in their two names. Oh, hooray, 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 shouted the boys and Jane. But Anthea could not shout. She was nearer crying. Oh, she said almost in a whisper, then it was true, and we have got our heart's desire. But I don't understand about the letter, Nurse was saying. I haven't had no letter. Oh, said Jane in a queer voice. I wonder whether it was one of those. They came that night, you know, when we were playing Devil in the Dark, and I put them in the hat stand drawer behind the clothes brushes, and... She pulled out the drawer as she spoke. And here they are. There was a letter for Nurse and one for the children. The letters told how Father had done being a war correspondent and was coming home, and how Mother and the lamb were going to meet him in Italy and all come home together. The lamb is their youngest sibling, their little brother, who's basically just a toddler who's gone with Mother when she was going away to stay somewhere warm and dry and to get over being sick. And how the lamb and Mother were quite well, and how a telegram would be sent to tell the day and the hour of their homecoming. Mercy me, said old Nurse. I declare if it's not too bad of you, Miss Jane, I shall have a nice to-do getting things straight for your pa and ma. Oh, never mind, Nurse, said Jane, hugging her. Isn't it just too lovely for anything? We'll come and help you, said Cyril. There's just something upstairs we've got to settle up, and then we'll all come and help you. Get along with you, said old Nurse, but she laughed jollily. Nice help you'd be, I know you. And it's 10 o'clock now, so she's got an hour and a quarter. There was, in fact, something upstairs that they had to settle. Quite a considerable something, too, and it took much longer than they expected. A hasty rush into the boys' room secured the Psammead, very sandy and very cross. It doesn't matter how cross and sandy it is, though, said Anthea. It ought to be there at the final council. In other words, they've gone to get the Psammead to take with them upstairs. It'll give the learned gentleman fits, I expect, said Robert, when he sees it. But it didn't. The dream is growing more and more wonderful, he exclaimed when the Psammead had been explained to him by Rekmara. I have dreamed this beast before. "Now," said Robert, "Jane has got the half amulet and I've got the whole. Show up, Jane." Jane untied the string and laid her half amulet on the table, littered with dusty papers and clay cylinders marked all over with little marks like the little prints of birds' little feet. So that's cuneiform. Robert laid down the whole amulet, and Anthea gently restrained the eager hand of the learned gentleman as it reached out yearningly towards the perfect specimen. And then, just as before on the Marcella quilt, so now on the dusty litter of papers and curiosities, the half amulet quivered and shook, and then, as steel is drawn to a magnet, it was drawn across the dusty manuscripts nearer and nearer to the perfect amulet, warm from the pocket of Robert, and then as one drop of water mingles with another when the panes of the window are wrinkled with rain, as one bead of mercury is drawn into another bead, the half amulet that was the children's, and was also Rekmara's, slipped into the whole amulet, and behold, there was only one, the perfect and ultimate charm. "And that's all right," said the Psammead, breaking a breathless silence. "Yes," said Anthea, "and we've got our heart's desire. Father and Mother and the lamb are coming home today." "But what about me?" said Rekmara. "What is your heart's desire?" Anthea asked. "Deep and great learning," said the priest, without a moment's hesitation. "A learning greater and deeper than that of any man of my land and my time, but learning too great is useless. If I go back to my own land and my own age, who will believe my tales of what I have seen in the future? Let me stay here, be the great knower of all that has been be the great knower of all that has been in that our time, so living to me, so old to you, about which your learned men speculate unceasingly and often. He tells me, vainly." He, the learned gentleman, tells Rekmara that the other learned gentlemen of the era of the children speculate about things quite inaccurately. "If I were you," said the Psammead, "I should ask the amulet about that. It's a dangerous thing trying to live in a time that's not your own. You can't breathe an air that's thousands of centuries ahead of your lungs without feeling the effects of it sooner or later. Prepare the mystic circle and consult the amulet." "Oh, what a dream!" cried the learned gentleman. "Dear children, if you love me, and I think you do, in dreams and out of them, prepare the mystic circle and consult the amulet." They did. As once before, when the sun had shone in August splendour, they crouched in a circle on the floor. Now the air outside was thick and yellow with the fog that by some strange decree always attends the cattle show week. And in the street, costers were shouting, that's people who sell, were shouting, "Urheku Setcher. Sorry. No, costers were shouting. They were not shouting them had word of power. So in the street, costers were shouting, "Urheku Setcher," Jane said the name of power, and instantly the light went out. And all the sounds went out too, so that there was a silence, trying to turn the page, and a darkness, both deeper than any darkness or silence that you have ever dreamed of imagining. It was like being deaf or blind, only darker and quieter even than that. Then out of that vast darkness and silence came a light and a voice. The light was too faint to see anything by, and the voice was too small for you to hear what it said. But the light and the voice grew, and the light was the light that no man may look on and live, and the voice was the sweetest and most terrible voice in the world. The children cast down their eyes, and so did everyone. "I speak," said the voice. "What is it that you would hear?" There was a pause. Everyone was afraid to speak. "What are we to do about Rekmara?" said Robert suddenly and abruptly. "Shall he go back through the amulet to his own time, or—" "No one can pass through the amulet now," said the beautiful, terrible voice, "to any land or any time. Only when it was imperfect could such things be, but men may pass through the perfect charm to the perfect union, which is not of time or space." I don't understand. "Would you be so very kind," said Anthea tremulously, "as to speak so that we can understand you?" "Good question, girl." "The Samoyed said something about Rekmara not being able to live here, and if he can't get back—" She stopped. Her heart was beating desperately in her throat, as it seemed. "Nobody can continue to live in a land and in a time not appointed," said the voice of glorious sweetness. "But a soul may live if in that other time and land there be found a soul so akin to it as to offer it refuge in the body of that land and time, that thus they too may be one soul in one body." The children exchanged discouraged glances, but the eyes of Rekmara and the learned gentleman met. And were kind to each other, the eyes, and promised each other many things, secret and sacred and very beautiful. Anthea saw the look. "Oh, but," she said, without at all meaning to say it, "dear Jimmy's soul isn't at all like Rekmara's. I'm certain it isn't. I don't want to be rude, but it isn't, you know. Dear Jimmy's soul is as good as gold, and nothing that is not good can pass beneath the double arch of my perfect amulet," said the voice. "If both are willing, say the word of power, and let the two souls become one for ever and evermore." "Shall I?" asked Jane. "Yes." Yes, the voices were those of the Egyptian priest and the learned gentleman, and the voices were eager, alive, thrilled with hope and the desire of great things. So Jane took the amulet from Robert and held it up between the two men and said for the last time the word of power. Hekau Setcha. The perfect amulet grew into a double arch. The two arches leaned to each other, making a great A. A stands for Amen, whispered Jane, what he was a priest of. Hush, breathed Anthea. The great double arch glowed in and through the green light that had been there since the name of power had first been spoken. I've just realised I should probably check to see if there's another picture. Oh yeah, there was one. This is just before we've got to all the words part of this. Sorry, I got so caught up in the storytelling that I forgot about what was happening. So this is when there's a circle on the floor and they're all around the circle. There's the learned gentleman, there's Rekmara, and then there's the children, and then there's the light coming from it. But it's the caption for it is, the children cast down their eyes, and so did everyone. And that's the last illustration. Hush, breathed Anthea. The great double arch glowed in and through the green light that had been there since the name of power had first been spoken. It glowed with a light more bright, yet more soft than the other light, a glory and splendour and sweetness unspeakable. Come, said Rekmara, holding out his hands. Come, cried the learned gentleman, and he also held out his hands. Each moved forward under the glowing, glorious arch of the perfect amulet. Then Rekmara quavered and shook, and as steel is drawn to a magnet, he was drawn under the arch of magic, nearer and nearer to the learned gentleman. And as one drop of water mingles with another when the window glass is rain wrinkled, as one quicksilver bead is drawn to another quicksilver bead, Rekmara, divine father of the temple of Amun-Ra, was drawn into, slipped into, disappeared into, and was one with Jimmy, the good, the beloved, the learned gentleman. And suddenly it was good daylight, and the December sun shone. The fog had passed away, like a dream. The amulet was there, little and complete in Jane's hand, and there were the other children, and the Samiad, and the learned gentleman. But Rekmara, or the body of Rekmara, was not there any more. As for his soul, "Oh, the horrid thing!" cried Robert, and put his foot on a centipede, as long as your finger, that crawled and wriggled and squirmed at the learned gentleman's feet. "That," said the Samiad, "was the evil in the soul of Rekmara." There was a deep silence. "Then Rekmara's him now," said Jane at last. "All that was good in Rekmara," said the Samiad. "He ought to have his heart's desire too," said Anthea, in a sort of stubborn gentleness. "His heart's desire," said the Samiad, "is the perfect amulet you hold in your hand, yes, and has been ever since he first saw the broken half of it." "We've got ours," said Anthea softly, "heart's desire." "Yes," said the Samiad. Its voice was crosser than they had ever heard it. "Your parents are coming home, and what's to become of me? I shall be found out and made a show of and degraded in every possible way. I know they'll make me go into Parliament. Hateful place, all mud and no sand. That beautiful Baalbek temple in the desert. Plenty of good sand there and no politics. I wish I was there, safe in the past, that I do." "I wish you were," said the learned gentleman, absently, yet polite as ever. The Samiad swelled itself up, turned its long snail's eyes in one last lingering look at Anthea, a loving look she always said and thought, and vanished. "Well," said Anthea after a silence, "I suppose it's happy. The only thing it ever really did care for was sand." "My dear children," said the learned gentleman, "I must have fallen asleep. I've had the most extraordinary dream." "I hope it was a nice one," said Cyril with courtesy. "Yes, I feel a new man after it. Absolutely a new man." There was a ring at the front doorbell. The opening of a door. Voices. "It's them!" cried Robert, and a thrill ran through 4 hearts. "Here!" cried Anthea, snatching the amulet from Jane and pressing it into the hand of the learned gentleman. "Here, it's yours, your very own, a present from us, because you're Rekmara as well as, because you're such a dear." She hugged him briefly but fervently, and the 4 swept down the stairs to the hall where a cabman was bringing in boxes, and where, heavily disguised in travelling cloaks and wraps, was their heart's desire. Threefold: Father, Mother, and the Lamb. "Bless me," said the learned gentleman, left alone. "Bless me, what a treasure! The dear children, it must be their affection that has given me this luminous aperseus. I seem to see so many things now, things I never saw before. The dear children, the dear, dear children." And that's the end of the book. There you go. So they finally got their heart's desire. So did the learned gentleman. So did Rekmara. I'm so pleased it worked out that way for Rekmara. So instead of him being destroyed because he was not good enough, the good of him combined with the learned gentleman, and the evil scurried away as a centipede and got stomped on. That makes sense, actually, for the story. Anyway, so how's that? What do you reckon? That was good. I really enjoyed that, and quite different to the way she told the previous stories about wishes and things like that. Just lovely. I really enjoyed that. I was just checking something. Sorry. Right, now I've told you all about bots and how if you're a streamer, it would be a really good idea to be making sure that they are not active in your stream, in your chat, or even lurking in your chat, because they can still receive gifted subscriptions, which means that real people, real users are not going to receive those gifted subscriptions, unfortunately. So don't. If you use your users in chat function on your stream and then copy the name, any names there that you're unsure of, and paste them in on the Twitch Insights bot page, and it comes up with any numbers after the name, that will show you how many channels that it's active in, sitting in those channels. Then hit the /ban space and then put in that name command, and they will be banned from your chat. They can't interact in your chat, which means they can't be present and steal people's information, but it also means that they can't actually receive gifted subs and things like that, which means that real people who are there actually supporting you are the ones who get honoured by receiving gifted subs, which is all good, I think. So the other thing is that, I was doing some of the things about being aware of bots and that they were not a good thing, but one of the things that I did actually, one of the ways I learned more about that was from a chap called Goriki. I'm going to give you a shout out for Goriki. And you can go to his Twitch channel and subscribe to him or follow him, and then he will give you some information about where you can find out more information about dealing with bots. This is if you're a streamer, really worth doing. Or if you are someone, even if you don't stream, but if you're a mod, very good. It's a good way to stay on top of housekeeping with your channel and make sure that people aren't abusing the service and putting you at the risk of being banned because of things that they do, because Twitch actually has the right to do that. If you are not prepared to look after your channel, your chat, you are held responsible for that, even if it's actually something that you weren't actively doing something to perpetuate a problem. You are held responsible for just negligence, I suppose, letting it happen. I don't know how strongly they police that, but it is something I've heard is definitely something you want to watch out for. So yeah, so that was a shout out to Goriki. I was going to tell you about Codex. So if you have enjoyed me reading this book, which is an old children's book, hang on. I'm just giving you the link for the Discord server for Codex. Codex is a group of people who read old books on Twitch. A lot of the other readers also play games and do just chatting and things like that as their stream types, which there's not a problem with that. But if you want other readers who read old books, then go to the Discord server I just gave you a link for. And also if you go below on my About Me page, there is a section there which is about Codex, and it's got links to all of the different streamers who are currently part of Codex, so that you can go to their channels and follow them, and then Twitch will tell you when they're live. Now, there's a really wide variety of books that they read, because there's a really wide variety of books that are available that are public domain books, really. I'm the only one who just reads children's books as far as I know. In terms of what we do outside of streaming, there are teachers, there are actors, there are voice actors, there are people who actually read or narrate audiobooks for a job. There's more than one of them doing that. All sorts of things. Get to know them, support them, follow them, encourage them. And also, if you're in a time zone where my reading time is a little bit awkward for you, then you may find that one of the others is regularly reading or gaming or anything else at a time that works well for you. There's usually somebody online in Codex who will be reading or doing something at various times of the day or night. I'm the only one, as far as I know, in New Zealand. The next nearest time zone wise is Goriki, who's up in Japan. So he's 3 hours behind me time wise, but it depends on what time of the day his sessions are. He reads during summer and winter long holidays for the Japanese school seasons. just because he needs his voice for the work that he does as a teacher. So there you go. Get involved, get to know the other Codex people, squash all the bots, help other people to understand that it's good to actually have a good, healthy channel rather than one that's limping along because it's being infested by bugs and losing support and losing the positives that you get by actually sharing good, healthy interactions with people. So you're welcome to join my Discord server, which there's a link for that below. I'm not going to type that in now. You can also, if you're watching on Twitch and you want to catch up on any of the books that I've read previously, or you missed out on any sections of the current book, go over to my YouTube channel, which I should give you the link for. And I put all the books into playlists. The latest reading that I have done will usually turn up about a week and a half or 2 weeks after I've done it live on Twitch. It will turn up in YouTube just because of time periods and all that sort of stuff. If you're watching this on YouTube and you want to actually be involved a little bit more, interact with other people while I'm reading, look things up and share that information in the chat so that I can read it out to everybody who's watching a recording and on YouTube, and don't get to see the chat, come over to my Twitch channel and there's a link for that on YouTube. So there you go. There's various social media links on both my locations like that, which you'll find me on all over the place. I'm on Instagram, I'm on Twitter, places like that. And yeah, thank you for being here. Thank you for making it a fun afternoon's reading. And I hope you have a great time ahead of you between now and when I see you next. Thank you. And as I say, usually, nearly every time, in the meantime, happy reading. We'll see you next time. Bye. Happy reading. Happy reading. Bye, bye, bye.